On technical language, or, for a chemist, nothing is dirty. Charismatic Mexican cartoonist extraordinaire Gelada greets you amicably. I welcome you to the second video in my Guide to the Superman series. Please listen carefully and patiently as I develop this idea, even if you don't right away see how this boring subject could be related to something as cool sounding as becoming Superman. The goal of these videos is to methodically corner you. I must make you aware of this so that you'll be my ally against your own sense of resistance to change. All I will say, you already know, but don't confront. You don't realize what the things you know imply, what they add up to. Here, we will confront things that are truly taboo. Trust me, you don't want to face up to these things. You may think you do, but you do not. This course is designed to force you into communion with this eldritch yet universal knowledge. Follow what I say carefully, be brave, and you will emerge on the other side as a fundamentally different, far superior creature. This I guarantee. If you have objections, please type them out in the comments below. Articulate them carefully, rigorously. I will happily respond to them. Focus on understanding each step and questioning it, testing inwardly if it is a sturdy argument on which to stand. If you start to see the implications of what I'm saying, you will likely feel a great deal of anxiety at the violent expansion of your horizons. What I will explain is completely incompatible with the systems of morality and understanding that govern the world and govern you. I ask that you dare walk towards profound change. In an effort to help fickle listeners reach the end of the video, my talk would be structured as a numbered list. The script for this video ended up longer than I initially wanted to. It's sort of too much. Absorb what you can. You can listen to it many times if you feel like there's value in it, but can't comfortably absorb it all in one sitting. The goal is, first of all, to convince you of the value of technical thinking. If I can manage that, I'll be satisfied. Without further ado, let's plunge in. 1. The path to the Superman. What I label technical language is the heart of the path to the Superman. If I only relate this to you and you were to persevere with it, you'd have a good shot at understanding this next step in the cognitive evolution of mankind. Nothing more is needed. It is also of vital importance to explain this idea at this point, as it is to be the basis of our communication and our quest. Technical language. What sort of problem is it meant to address? What is it about? Different people will associate different words to different experiences and information. Let me use ice cream as an example. Even if we are both aware, say, of the dictionary definition of ice cream, very different ideas and emotions might come to you or I when we hear it. I may, for example, be using it as shorthand for a pleasant thing, a treat, while you may loathe the dessert. Maybe your dog was run over by an ice cream truck once, and ice cream is forever tainted with strong negative emotions to you. Even if we put aside the different associations ice cream evokes in us, we may think of different bits of information related to it. You may think, oh, a dairy product, while I may be referring to water-based ice cream. I may haphazardly use the term to encompass similar things, such as ice pops and the like. Of course, context can be used to restrict possible interpretations of what we say, but this is often insufficient. Technical language is, among other things, about using words as if they were numbers in a mathematical equation. Using words in such a way that you restrict their meaning, making it crystal clear. 2. Pink fluff. Think of the word positive. People use it to mean something that makes you feel good, something nice and/or optimistic. If I say then that technical language is positive language, and that the path to the Superman is, first and foremost, to think positively, you'll no doubt believe me to be a peddler of corny, cheap, self-help fluff. You'd think, this fucker truly means to sell to me as important the trite notion one should be a steadfast optimist, to always seek the silver lining. I am, of course, not a peddler of corny fluff, but momentous, life-altering truth, and I will tell you, the path to becoming Superman is to think positively. 3. Negativity is only comparison. I don't mean to use the word positive in the way it is normally used. I am here using the term in a technical way, the mathematical sense of the word, free of moral or emotional baggage. Again, I'm not talking about silver linings. I'm not talking about optimism. What I mean to say is, you must realize the true nature of being. The true nature of being is. Existence is a wholly, completely positive phenomenon. When a baby is born burdened with an incurable disease, only to suffer for a brief yet abominably painful time before dying, choking on its own blood, that is, yes, a completely positive phenomenon. I am speaking technically. Let me explain. What we call negativity is in reality, in essence, only comparison. This is what technical language allows us to do, to realize the secret meaning of words, to peek behind the curtain and perceive things as a scientist does. It is, similar to etymology, a path to the source of meaning, a path to learning about the structure of meaning. To return to the title of this lesson, for a chemist, nothing is dirty. Reflect on that phrase for a moment. This simple phrase holds a very deep rabbit hole within. It is a phrase that points to the true nature of so-called negativity. I say, negativity is only an illusion, and always, always, a positive comparison and/or association between two or more positive things. Analyze any negative statement, any negative concept. How does it work? You will quickly notice that to say something is not, one must first say that it is, and only then add a not to qualify what was established. This room does not have a pink elephant in it. Do not think about a pink elephant. That elephant is not pink. There is a pink panther, but no pink elephants outside of those featured in Dumbo's Drunken Dreams. Isn't that pink elephant by now an almost tangible reality? To come back to our bereaved, hypothetical baby, the brief moments of life said sick baby managed to endure remain a positive triumph of his system against internal and external forces seeking to break him apart. Label the scenario tragic if you want, but tragedy is no less a positive phenomenon, as it is an emotion, a word of Greek origin, and a product of a mind healthy enough to be conscious. Pain means your nerves are healthy enough to relay information to your brain. A bad hand is only bad because you can imagine a preferable alternative, and you can only do that from the position you are in. This is your ambition and your desire stemming from empathy at work. Empathy, another misunderstood word. Technically, it means you see another as a reflection of yourself. Far from being a stance of self-effacement, a stance of self-negation, it is overflowing ego, overflowing self-love, claiming the external world as part of it. 4. Mr. Spock. For a chemist, nothing is dirty. The title of this video. This phrase points to the imprecision within much of what is labeled negative language. I am talking here also of the moral dimension of it. Dirty is often used as a negative term, namely unclean. Notice again how we have two positives at work here. We are comparing the object labeled dirty with whatever idea we have of what clean would mean in the context. Of course, we can use the term dirty without there being any tint of moral condemnation, but we most often think things should not be dirty. We generally believe they should be clean. Of course, for a chemist, to say that something is dirty is just to be imprecise. No such thing as dirt in the periodic table of elements. No such ingredient. No such combination of electrons around an atomic nucleus. You may think this isn't important, but what we are actually doing by calling things dirty, by calling things evil, is forcefully affirming a taboo. Instead of describing the object in a precise and thus necessarily positive way, you are making it a problem beyond your understanding. Misunderstood problems, misdiagnosed problems, are unlikely to be solved. What you believe to be a moral issue is in fact a cognitive issue, an issue related to your capacity and willingness to understand something. In the quest to self-hypnotize yourself to a narrative, you wield the tools of censorship on yourself. You castrate yourself. You deny yourself the chance of processing whatever you label dirty. A good example of a chemist character for whom dirty is never a satisfactory adjective would be Mr. Spock from the television series Star Trek. Mr. Spock is a character that is routinely challenged by the unknown. He is constantly confronted by strange, new, invariably dangerous things, and, as you well know if you remember the famous show, he almost always labels these new alien phenomena fascinating. His mind is clearly eager and delighted to explore new things. This is because the mind, unburdened by taboo, discovers all around it an endless universe of inexhaustible wonder. Yes, said mind will love puppies and flowers and honey-infused sweets, but it will also find beauty in serial killers, excrement, and exotic diseases. Everything, when processed, can become valuable, and everything, given enough time and effort, can be processed. Ugliness is another word for the unprocessed, and beauty, technically, is the product of successfully digesting and integrating something. This is something psychologists should understand well. For a chemist, nothing is dirty. For a chemist, everything is a positive phenomenon. For a chemist, for Mr. Spock, everything is fascinating if at all important. Let us define an important word technically, positively, then. What is mechanically, phenomenologically, what we call good? We call good whatever we manage to process successfully. If we could digest plutonium, then plutonium would be nutritious. It would likely end up tasting good to us, as food typically tastes good to us in direct proportion to the benefit we derive from it, excess consumption notwithstanding. As we digest food, we also digest experiences, ideas, information in general. People will often flaunt their scars. What was in the moment traumatic can become a source of identity, a source of pride later on, if successfully processed. Exercise, for example, is trauma. You punish your body, your muscles, and grow stronger as a consequence. The important point to observe is the technical principle. Of course, you can't process a lightning bolt right now, but that doesn't mean that lightning bolts are dirty or evil or should remain taboo. If we could harness that sort of energy, if we could be healed by absorbing lightning bolts, wouldn't that be cool? Such fantasies need not be made tangible for the principle to be clear. By studying such phenomena, we can understand its logic, and said logic makes us stronger. We can develop science and technology and, at the very least, fear lightning less. Again, let's check back in with our sick, dying baby. If we, for example, become hysterical with grief and sorrow and content ourselves with calling whatever ails him evil, then his fate is surely sealed. If we instead were to seek detailed understanding of his disease, his life and condition, we would stand a far better chance to help him. Imagine again that you had a very strong, hysterically emotional reaction to the idea of cutting up children with a knife. You wouldn't then be able to perform a life-saving appendectomy when needed. You wouldn't even think of it. And because of your taboo, the kid would, again, die. There is no isolated principle of good or bad. Rather, we can judge things to be beneficial or detrimental. There is nothing that is intrinsically good or evil. There is actually nothing intrinsically anything, as existence is relative. Existence is based on relativity. Even a completely horrifying event can lead to great things. You can save the life of a child as an act of secret cruelty, and that child could grow up to be a mass murderer. The universe is a place of constant flux. By opposing the principle of taboo, we allow ourselves the chance to render everything beneficial, everything, at the very least, fascinating. This is what positive thinking allows. This is what technical thinking does. Once you truly understand the principle, everything becomes your responsibility to perceive as useful, beautiful, interesting. It's up to you to make it whatever you want to make it. Bacteria are a product of the same forces that added up to produce us. Consider the following proposition. All of the universe is one phenomenon, linked by strict causality and interdependent existence, broken into multiple voices only by the phenomenon of language. 5. A painting of a whole, a painting of a mountain. So, in the future, instead of saying that something is dirty, the goal is to be more precise. Thinking positively is not the act of seeking a silver lining, rather, it's the act of observing things as precisely as you can, to notice their infinite specificity. It's not that the object lacks cleanliness, rather, the object is covered with X or Y precise substance that you judge should be better placed elsewhere. We go from a negative assertion to a completely positive one. We can't, in fact, think or utter anything properly negative, for the structural reasons I already outlined. But, by stating things positively, the underlying nature of the phenomenon is clearer to us. We avoid obfuscating the issue, and the diagnosis is bound to be more helpful. Some imbeciles actually base the entirety of their thinking on negativity. Can you imagine such depths of idiocy? This is why communists nowadays are incapable even of articulating what a woman is. They can't utter anything positive. They can only think and speak critically, which means negatively, which is, as I've explained, merely incoherent hypocrisy. For a chemist, nothing is dirty. Let us never again be satisfied with words such as dirty whenever precision counts. For if we specify what the sort of dirt covering the object is, we are bound to have an easier time removing it. That is, if we judge the substance to be better placed elsewhere, like down the drain, for example, a drain that leads somewhere, again, a positive place. We cannot erase trash from existence, as energy and matter can only be transformed, never destroyed, another telltale sign of an exclusively positive universe. Perhaps it will be clearer to you if I explain it this way. An idea is always a positive phenomenon. A painting of a whole is no less real than one of a mountain. An idea is something happening in your brain or in your mind, if you prefer, or wherever, but it is, and by virtue of being, it is positive. An idea, never mind what it's about, its shape and color, or whatever else, remains a relationship between neurons, between words, an image, a thought that positively exists. In order for something not to exist, it must first exist, and then, after adding the not to make it so it does not exist, it exists still, as a negative now, as a registered debt on a brain, on a piece of paper. Another way to grasp it might be to think about a dog as a deformed being. Imagine a dog as a deformed being. Imagine being informed that a cute puppy is in fact a completely different creature, deformed in such a way as to perfectly resemble a dog. Instead of seeing a dog, you would be looking at a hideous monster because you would be looking at it negatively. Imagine that I then tell you the dog-looking thing is a hologram or an impossibly realistic robot. Your feelings would then change again. Positive thinking is about perceiving things, perceiving your own perception as a positive phenomenon, as something that is, however and whatever it is, rather than being the failure to be something else. Failure is, after all, another positive phenomenon, a comparison, the sign of an ambition, perhaps. You most likely do not realize just how fantastically important this simple idea is. Its implications are immense and they are also completely incompatible with the whole outlook humanity has lived under for millennia. For now, please try and understand the basic argument. That should be enough. If you understand this basic argument, that there is nothing negative in this world, that there is nothing that truly isn't, you have already given the first key step in building the Superman within you, and you are already part of a very, very select group of people. 6. Untinted words. Think of the word stubborn. Now compare it with the word perseverant. Both words have this tint to them, one undesirable, the other desirable. There is a constant behind them both, though. By using emotionally charged words, you hypnotize yourself and others. They fulfill our need to vent emotions through our speech. This is also why we fucking curse. There's a catharsis to it. All this is well and good, but this is a method through which we convince ourselves, theatrically, of things we should perhaps be skeptical of. People, in fact, argue about whether a person is stubborn or perseverant, as if it was somehow something external to their own judgment. Is he objectively stubborn or objectively perseverant? This makes no sense. The two words are meant to convey the same idea. It is just a matter of whether you determine it to be in tune or not with your values. That's what good means, you know. Technically, what people mean when they say good is congruent with my values. A note, anticipating a misunderstanding. Even though objectivity cannot, by definition, exist, as existence is based on relativity and objectivity as a concept is incompatible with this notion, that doesn't mean that anything goes, whatever, there is nothing we can grab a hold of, oh, woe is me. There are clearly arguments that we judge inferior or superior to others, perspectives that are more convincing than others. The impossibility of an objective perspective does not for a second imply a world without authority. Rather, it implies a world without a final authority. The world as process. The collapse of the idea of objectivity under its own definition does not imply a world without a point, without an end, without authority. Rather, it leads to a vision of a world with endless ends, endless points, and intact if ever evolving, authority. So, there can be no final authority. What people mean by objective is, more often than not, an idea that was arrived at through a process in which detailed counter-arguments were considered. You can't really go out of your body to perceive something, and even if you could, you would then have another body or point of reference to which you are judging whatever you are judging. When people say, "Is that objective truth?" they mean, was that conclusion tested? Were alternatives and alternative points of view considered? It's all fine and good to use words in a relaxed fashion, but technical language has now become an imperative antidote to a world where everyone is unaware of the roots of their own thoughts, the words they use. If we are to review and challenge our own presuppositions, our own prejudices, we should first know what they are, and to do that, we must carefully articulate what we actually mean when we speak. Just as science evolves, morality evolves, our bodies evolve. Think about the drastic changes our species has undergone already, not only morally and culturally, but physically. Even religious people don't quite expect God to return an adventure to end for good, resulting in a motionless world. Would you even wish for that? A world without peril, without change, set and done. It would very much be akin to being buried alive. Thankfully, that is not possible, as existence is, by definition, relative and in constant movement. Now, going back to tinted, emotionally charged, hypnotic, non-technical language. I talked of Mr. Spock before. It is difficult to recall him ever resorting to emotionally charged, tinted words. I ask that we develop the capacity to follow his example. It is not a matter of, like the Vulcans, banishing emotions from our breast. Rather, we should develop the capacity to observe them, keep them at bay if needed, to ascend to a more precise perception of things. Like I said before, Mr. Spock is not emotionless. He is at least partial to one particular emotion, that of wonder. The pointy-eared fellow is constantly fascinated. Wouldn't awe be a great replacement for many of the painful or dull emotions we spend so much time in? It would be a great starting point, at least, to at least be in awe of the endlessly specific world in and around us. There is an emotion that dares confront the magnitude of the universe. To escape the inertia of our current way of thinking, in particular to escape the emotional hypnosis we constantly place ourselves in, we must engage in a diagnostic of the situation that is, again, altogether now, technical, precise, and entirely positive, where every single one of the vectors of power, of the distinct voices that contribute to the battle, is understood to be as valid an expression of existence as the rest. The voices that will triumph and prevail are no more important than those that will be made to play the role of medium, of vessel. Those defeated remain, just as a golden medal means nothing without the existence of a silver and bronze one. We must fight against our own resistance to change, and we cannot do that unless we find faults and cracks within our mental cages. Emotionally charged, tinted language is one of the mechanisms we use to avoid finding fault within ourselves, but More importantly, we use it to avoid finding fault in our perception of things, which is what keeps us from growing cognitively. Let me paint a picture of how and why tinted, emotionally charged language and taboo work together to create a narrative. Imagine that you live in the distant past and are forced to deal with a family member afflicted with leprosy. You have no way to cure the disease, and you know it to be contagious and lethal. You shun the family member. You shun them, and you do it while trying to avoid touching them. You push and poke them with a stick, or you throw rocks at them to make them go away. That is the only wise course of action. Of course, the compassion and love you feel for that unlucky person would be major hindrances when implementing this course of action. What to do? People in such situations often choose to believe in things that aid them in doing what they judge they must. They will claim leprosy to be a just punishment from heaven. They will say that illness is the result of secret crimes and sins. By demonizing the afflicted, they make driving them off to die alone much easier emotionally. The point here is to point at the true nature of what we call evil. Evil is taboo. Evil is hypnosis. Evil is self-deception. Evil is ignorance. There is no isolated evil force, but rather meaning in context. When people say evil, they mean undesirable or something that I think should be taboo. Leprosy is not evil. It is a product of the same forces that produced humanity, the same forces that added up to create life on Earth. We eat meat. Is it that strange for bacteria to eat meat as well? In contrast, if you describe the sickness and the situation scientifically, if you open your arms to the often frustrating richness and complexity of a situation, you are confronted with a world that seems not to have a clear narrative to it, an expansive world. Leprosy, you see, is caused by a specific bacteria, Mycobacterium leprae. Our ancestors were, most likely, bacteria. It is likely that eukaryotic cells, of which humans are made, evolved from bacteria about 2 billion years ago. A popular theory to explain the origin of eukaryotic cells is that they evolve via a symbiotic relationship between two independent prokaryotic bacteria. We come from bacteria, just as leprosy does. Bacteria are a perfectly positive phenomenon, a jewel, in fact, of the cosmos. That sort of idea, that sort of image is at least as valid as the notion of leprosy as a bane on life imposed by heavenly forces. I mean, bacteria can be interpreted to mean an endless amount of things. I am here advocating for tackling problems such as leprosy in an honest way, a brave way that rejects the crutches of taboo or the extreme simplification and falsehood of understanding something only as the failure to be something else. While taboo and hysterically emotional language are understandable as psychological techniques developed to cope with hostile situations, we must recognize their drawbacks. The wonder of the world is greatly diminished by imposing, via falsehood, simple, catchy, emotionally charged narratives onto it, and by seeking a final truth at every turn. Taboo is the zenith of this, a point of collapse where thought is made to cease by force. We are, in fact, lying to ourselves when we sell each other emotionally charged narratives that fail to do justice to the complexity of the world. To acknowledge the infinite does not mean we must remain indecisive. We can't, in fact, help but reach conclusions every instant. Emotional and intellectual conclusions are what the world is made of. They are unavoidable. One can reach conclusions without resorting to cheap tricks. One can reach honest conclusions. Everyone feels that they have to lie to themselves constantly in order to live, that it's impossible to live honestly. This is not true. An honest life is a path to growth. It takes greater effort to confront the true complexity of things, such as leprosy, but that effort is a path to riches. For starters, a technical, honest, positive study of the disease is imperative if you want to cure it. Who knows what possible wonders lie in wait within its genome? Perhaps one day leprosy could be the bedrock of wonders. One day, it's already the case. As I said, that humans are descendants of bacteria. The moral is, become aware of emotional tint and prejudice in words, and brave the world without such crutches. Grow. Force your ideas and world to grow by learning to be skeptical of the cartoonish narratives people craft to simplify reality and never lie to yourself. Know that honesty is a central part of the Superman project. 7. Master morality. By becoming a technical thinker, a positive thinker, what you are doing is changing your starting point and your basic sense of morality. Everything that stems from an incorrect starting point is also incorrect. Conversely, everything that stems from a correct starting point is correct. You might think what I just said is not quite right. Can't things switch from correct to incorrect? You no doubt ask. Trust me, there is a powerful truth hidden within this apparently incomplete equation. It will come to you if you persevere with technical thinking. Everyone and their aunt in this world functions from a negative starting point. People understand things as fundamentally flawed, as fundamentally incomplete. As I explained, these ideas are structurally secondary, necessarily secondary, and wrong, completely wrong, incoherent, stupid. You can't have imperfection without perfection first. You can't not do something without explaining what it is you won't do. You can't not think of a pink elephant without first thinking of a pink elephant. Negativity and imperfection are, in fact, only illusions. Adopting technical thinking is, among other things, adopting the mentality, the morality Friedrich Nietzsche called master morality, the first stage in the journey towards the Superman. Negative thinking, incoherent thinking, illusory thinking was labeled by Nietzsche slave morality. Negative thinking is Platonism. Platonism is nihilism, as it argues that our world exists only as a negative, secondary, bungled shadow of the true absolute world, an absolute which by definition cannot exist, as existence is based on movement and relativity. Plato is, as you will come to understand, wrong, dead and wrong, but not dead enough. This is massively, fantastically important. People get confused over master morality versus slave morality because of the tint the words have. Technical thinking clarifies this. Instead of master versus slave, think primary versus secondary. A master thinks, feels, and acts first. A slave thinks, feels, and acts second, in response to a perceived other. Wash the words, in this context, of all emotional prejudice and understand them mathematically. An enslaved person could, theoretically, think through master morality, and an enslaver could, without issue, be host to slave morality. This certainly has happened often, as slave morality has plagued countless conquerors through history. You have been conditioned to value secondary perspective because you have been conditioned to be a slave. There should be no slaves in the world. Don't misunderstand. I don't mean to suggest that anyone labeled a slave should be killed. Rather, people should be made to perceive themselves as masters of themselves, as fundamentally free, and their potentially invaluable contributions should be allowed to compete with others in freedom. My wish to eradicate slave morality also comes from how repugnant slavery is to my senses. I don't think any human should live as a slave, because I recognize my image in other humans, and I perceive my reflection on a slave as disgusting. Let all children, all men and women, know themselves as masters, as primary, as completely positive. Let them know that they are by their own strength. They stand not because some master, some God, some objective reality, some transcendent authority wishes them to, but because they themselves wish to stand. Let this be a world of loving strife instead of hateful peace, the peace of death. Empathy, whose secret name is overflowing ego, should lead us to seek the course of action conducive to the greatest glory of all living things. I will further develop and clarify these ideas in future videos. For now, let them merely be introduced. Mull them over, friend. I ask also that you comment below and help me share the video around. 8. Key ideas. Don't worry too much about understanding them right away. To gather here the important ideas I am trying to impart. Technical language is the path to cognitive growth and plugs you back into the coherence negative thinking bars you from. Cognitive growth is something your mind resists, as the very structure of your mind is what said cognitive growth endangers. You are supplanting a ruler with a new one. Within psychology, resistance is understood to go hand in hand with development. Without resistance, no development. A useful comparison here is exercise. If you don't feel pain while exercising, you won't see progress either. Technical language is mathematical language. Its goal is to be as precise as possible, to carefully articulate what you mean for your benefit and that of others. Technical language is language that is entirely positive, in the sense that it's cognizant of the fact there are no real negative phenomena, only comparisons and associations between positive phenomena. For example, negative numbers still exert a force within a mathematical equation. They count, they speak, they matter, they are active, and thus, in reality, they are positive. They're not an actual absence. Negativity is therefore a positive thing, as paradoxical as that may sound. Technical language is a complete rejection of the concept of taboo. It is incompatible with taboo or things that are obvious or self-evident. The exercise helps us pinpoint the ways in which we hypnotize ourselves, the weak points in the chains we use to convince ourselves of things we ought doubt. Technical language, technical thinking, reveals to the honest person the incoherence within Platonism and washes your nihilism off your soul, along with all its odious manifestations: socialism, feminism, Christianity, etc. Technical language destroys the concept of objectivity. Future videos will more carefully insist on why this is. For chemists, nothing is dirty. Let us be like chemists then. Let us be like Mr. Spock. This does not mean banishing emotions, but becoming aware of how said emotions prevent us, at times, from honestly ascertaining our circumstances. Notice I didn't say objectively. This is a massively important point. Label things positively, precisely, honestly, and thus process them successfully, cultivating a world entirely composed of beauty and beauty to be found. It has nothing to do with paying any sort of debt to an external authority. We have no way to touch anything external, just as we have no way of decidedly knowing if we are dreaming or not. The goal is to find stronger truth, not final truth. The goal is for life to go on, to flourish endlessly. Wish for a world of endless ends, to endlessly justify endless, fertile, exuberant means. Technical language is a weapon against thought-terminating clichés, which are a central feature of all cults and systems of mind domination. There is always a path to freedom as long as you're honest with yourself. Don't accept my authority. Accept the invitation to think honestly and escape from whatever painful frame you no doubt inhabit right now. The basic idea: you feel, you think that you must live lying, that you must lie to live. This isn't true. You don't need to lie, not to yourself, to live. Practice telling yourself the truth, and seeking the truth you shield yourself away from in order to grow. It should be easy enough to find it. Follow the compass of your own fear to the ideas you find most frightening. 9. Destroyed pillars of slave morality. Thinking as a master does, positively, leads us to realize a great number of things. Thinking through things honestly, freely, positively, destroys many, if not most, of the pillars of meaning people take for granted. Specifically, it affects 4 subjects of massive importance. The arguments that will follow are of a mathematical sort. They are examples of if X, therefore Y. They proceed inexorably from positions we share. Take the time to review them and think carefully about them. If you want to voice any objections, know that mine is a tiny channel. So, if you take the time to type out a comment below, you're sure to earn a response. Be encouraged. From my experience, only desperate people with excess energy, feel like they can afford to be honest. I hope you are of that sort, and I hope you comment. Pay attention now. This is where it hits the fan. First destroyed pillar. Error. Error is the first important concept that yields and falls when faced with the light of strict, positive reasoning. Error in applied mathematics means the difference between a true value and an estimate or approximation of that value. This, again, is a relationship between two things. The heart of error, according to this definition, is imprecision, a gap between two things. There is an issue here, though, as the description and the measured object both go on forever. The percentage of said forever encompassed by its description will therefore never increase. To give an example, if you start to describe a piece of paper, you end up having to describe the idea of trees as well, since paper comes from trees. You would have to then continue on to the phenomenon of rain and life on Earth in general. To make matters worse, if you started describing something, anything, you would have to start integrating your description into the description, and in your quest for precision, in your quest to fill that gap and expunge error, you could never end, trapped in a loop. This is the point, hopefully, where you realize that you are in fact adding to the problem, not solving it. In the Achilles paradox, Achilles races to catch a slower runner, for example, a tortoise that is crawling in a line away from him. The tortoise has a head start, so if Achilles hopes to overtake it, he must run at least as far as the place where the tortoise presently is. But by the time he arrives there, it will have crawled to a new place. So then Achilles must run at least to this new place. But the tortoise meanwhile will have crawled on, and so forth. Achilles will never catch the tortoise. The idea being, of course, that Achilles is pushing the tortoise further and further, just as everything only grows in complexity the more we study it. We are part of the universe and can't therefore judge it as if external to it. There is nothing beyond our thinking to reach. We are just fighting for strength, not for final strength, which people define as truth or final truth. Final truth, final strength would be an argument that would tolerate no further development. In other words, if someone uttered total truth, the universe would end. Scientists, in fact, fear this could happen as a result of the Large Hadron Collider experiments. Look it up. Error does not properly exist. There are only weaker or stronger ideas, weaker or stronger numbers, arguments that are more or less convincing, stronger or weaker phenomena. A fundamentally positive universe is incompatible with the idea of error. In a positive universe, there can be no error. In a negative universe, there can only be error. In both cases, the category, if used strictly, becomes meaningless. The only way it could mean anything is if there could be error and truth. But this, as I explain, is incoherent. There are either shades of endless error or shades of endless truth that proceed from an initial irredeemable error or an initial perfect truth. So, choose between being right or wrong, only that you can only be wrong if you are first right. You can't have a wrong nothing. You must have something perfect, meaning with no wrongness in it, to then make it wrong somehow. This is impossible, as the key characteristic of perfection is its incorruptibility. If it can go wrong, it is only because there was the potential of wrong in it, latent wrong, if you will, and that is, of course, no longer perfect. Our Platonist, nihilist, incoherent culture is, of course, one that presupposes everything is erroneous. Everyone is fond of saying, nothing's perfect, which is, of course, another way of saying that only no thing is perfect. More on that later. Things are, therefore, all correct or all wrong, which is another way of saying that they are or they are not. They either are something or are not something. It is always a comparison. Things exist via relativity, after all. There is nothing that is tall or heavy or fast by itself. It is always through friction, through comparison, that things exist. Since positivity is a prerequisite for wrongness, then things are necessarily intrinsically correct. Things are all correctly, exactly, down to the infinite, what they are first, and then acquire the label incorrect as an extra. This incorrectedness stems from a comparison to another endlessly precise, endlessly correct things. How could two rights magically produce one wrong? They can't. They can only produce the illusion of error, a dream of incoherence, a slave's dream, a secondary dream. Now, I don't want to expunge the word error, of course. Error remains a useful category in many contexts. It is a useful word, but remember, to ascertain an error requires it to be compared to a contrasting idea. The wrong answer and the right answer are but two sides of the same coin. This completely invalidates the trite saying, I only know I know no thing. In order to know no thing, you must first know its basis, that being thing. Coherence commands us to put aside such hypocrisy. A man that claims to know nothing knows, in fact, at the very least, two things. The first being thing, and the second one being nothing. Second destroyed pillar, crime. Crime is also a secondary phenomenon, as it can't exist without a preceding law to infringe upon. Just like a painting needs a canvas, crime only makes sense in the context of a positive legal structure, one that asserts itself first and foremost as valid. This assertion is, invariably an act of violence. Friends, understand the concept of violence technically. Nihilists, or socialists as they are called nowadays, say things like, "What is the robbing of a bank compared to the founding of a bank?" Of course, both acts, robbing and founding a bank, are expressions of power. It is this assertion and the fact that it necessarily victimizes others they object to. They object to the phenomenon of power, the very heart of existence. It is only through friction, through contrast, through antagonism that things exist. This is the principle of relativity. Nothing is big unless compared to something small. Simple enough, right? Individuals or organizations assert themselves. They seek to dominate, they seek power, and they clash. Power, another maligned word. The power to breathe, the power to protect, the power to eat. Those are expressions of power too. If you take something, some, including you, may label the act a crime. But this already presupposes a base level of violence, which is the creation of laws and a sense of order and morality that seeks to impose itself onto the world. The word crime can mean entirely different things in different contexts. Criminals love crime, you could say. For them, it is the policemen that pursue them that are the true criminals, and so on and so forth. For a lion, it must feel criminal when a gazelle denies its cubs their daily meal by deftly escaping his claws. For the gazelle, the lion is a murderous criminal. It is a world of clashing forces, and the concept of crime is a tool, a word, groups create as part of their structures of power. Everything, every single thing, is a structure of power. This is why Nietzsche coined will to power as the core principle of existence, a very profound truth indeed. Your mind, your body, your genes, the solar system and all in it, along with the rest of the universe, your judgment, all these are structures of power. Coherence demands we reject completely the ridiculous demonization of the word power and understand it technically, positively, for what it means in different contexts. Recognize crime for what it is. Something a code of law labels detrimental to it. No more, no less. Third destroyed pillar, sin. If we jump to the realm of morality and the realm of religion, say Christian religion, a sin, like a crime, is only labeled thus because it conflicts with another will that classes it thus. For Christianity, this clash is only valid if we accept a plurality of divinities. If Satan is capable of truly opposing God, then he is fundamentally his equal. Even if he was a being of smaller magnitude, in essence, he would be his equal. Christians, of course, would never agree to this. But then they face another problem. If there is but one God, as they claim, then sin is necessarily harmonious with God, a godly creation like the rest, deemed worthy of existence. In that context, Satan is just another servant of God. You have to choose. You can't have your cake and eat it. Sin is either impossible or, like all crimes, only a tool of war between two opposing and, on a fundamental level, equally valid powers. This is very similar to using the word pagan, which is a fantastically imprecise negative term. It just means non-Christian. Let me tell you, there are a lot of non-Christian things. For starters, every single being that lived before the advent of this religion on earth. You learn preciously little about something if you are told it is pagan. Coherence points to the fact that there is nobody that can affirm conflict and monotheism at the same time. The monotheistic world is, by definition, one defined by a total lack of conflict. Anyone that affirms conflict, anyone that prefers, anyone that strives, is affirming with his actions and emotions a polytheistic universe. This is the conclusion technical language leads us to. If you believe in conflict, you are, in fact, polytheistic. Fourth destroyed pillar, God. You knew it was coming. I will talk about this only briefly as I'm basically repeating myself. God and objective truth are one and the same. In fact, one is based on the other, with the purest intellectual argument for it being the one pushed forward by Plato, with his idea of ideal forms. Anyway, if you reflect on the definition of omnipotence and omniscience, you will come to the conclusion that the very attributes that define the monotheistic God make him incompatible with the concept of existence. God is the very concept of external authority, which is a contradiction, an incoherent notion. Authority, in order to be authority, cannot be external. Authority is in fact what is present, what is internal, what is here. God is, by definition, always elsewhere. There is a fundamental difference between gods and God, between polytheism and monotheism. Monotheism cannot abide conflict. Monotheism was, to a large extent, likely devised because, in contrast with polytheism, it helps affirm a single political authority as valid. The very notion of conflict is incompatible with an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful being. If he was all-knowing and all-seeing and all-powerful, there would be nothing for him to know or see or do, as there would be nothing against which he could bump into. Friends, friction is the heart of existence. Relativity. There is, by definition, no tangible active absolute, as said landing into reality, said entrance into reality, would make the thing cease to be absolute. God is, in fact, the only thing that cannot ever exist. There could be a flying spaghetti monster, but, by the very structure of being, the absolute could never be isolated. If God has to do something, if God has to see anything, if there is any phenomenon that somehow clashes with his, then he is no longer absolute. He would be, no matter how powerful, just a God, and not the God. It's so amusing. People wish for there to be a God in order to be saved, to be consoled, to find safety. Safety from who? Salvation and safety from what? If God was absolute, there would be nothing to be afraid of. Do you see how absurd it is? The idea of God is, in fact, a mask for the reality of taboo. The taboo and the holy are one and the same, prohibitions of thought, sustaining forever the concept of sin, through which we are all made into shadows and slaves, at the mercy of whoever is conscious of this and manipulates it for his benefit. Ah, were there cruel masters to the world? The sad truth is that our world is likely masterless. A masterless world of slaves, where the kings are victims along with the rest. I fear this may very well be the reality. Mao, Stalin, and Hitler likely truly believed their cause to be just and victimized themselves along with their subjects. They saw themselves as slaves to their circumstances, at least. Slave morality, secondary morality, objective morality, Christian morality makes us worse than mere slaves. We are, within its bounds, to understand ourselves as bungled, marred, eternally defective, eternally condemned slaves. Within its bounds, to understand ourselves as bungled, marred, eternally defective, eternally condemned slaves. Within its bounds, we are eternal prisoners. I ask that you tell me, whose authority, whose judgment makes this be? If supposed perfection is not of this world, why then do we make it a tool of universal torment? Christians nowadays believe themselves to be the enemies of communism. It was Friedrich Nietzsche that correctly stated, Christianity is Platonism for the masses. Well, I want to expand that into socialism is Christianity for the masses, and feminism is socialism for the masses of the masses of the masses, and so on and so forth. Trans ideology, queer ideology in particular, represents the current zenith of this phenomenon. Its victims so saturated with a feeling of sin that they kill themselves at absurd rates. Pure self-hatred. God, as I explained before, has now shifted away from religion to a large extent. The greatest worshippers of God, of transcendent authority, of objective authority, nowadays call themselves atheists. You are most likely among those unconscious nihilists. You don't even know what you think. My wretched friend, I want to help you so badly. I plan to dedicate a future video to explaining Christianity. Of course, Nietzsche's famous Antichrist does this already, but everyone and their aunt ignores that book and its implications. The base idea is that the technical definition for the God in the Bible is nothingness. An absolute creature, as I explained, cannot, by definition, exist. People think that arguing against this external authority amounts to saying that the world is not strict, that this is a world where anything goes willy-nilly. They would go mad, they claim, if there was no God. If we lived in a world of imprecision, a random world. This is completely absurd. This world is infinitely precise, as I explained when dissecting error. Things are exactly what they are, down to the infinite, and thus perfect, down to the infinite. Things exist in friction, things exist as processes only. By worshipping the Absolute, we are merely finding a method to insult the world, and live in incoherent indigestion. We create a barrier around things to be digested, trauma, cherished ideas, impressive horrors, etc. This barrier makes them fester and slowly destroy us. This is taboo. This is the holy. This is objectivity. There is no final truth, only consensus, as truth, along with the rest of the universe, is an unending process. Like I said in my first video, this is a world of endless ends, a new conclusion every instant. Isn't that the best thing imaginable? Do you realize the joy of it? The joy of endless new. Do you really want to find yourself locked into a completely set world, a world where you know everything? Would you even be alive at that point? Verify the impossibility of God right now, where you are, by noticing the truth of this. Existence is process. Existence is fire. The word God, as it is most often used, means only taboo, a place where thought is made to end for the sake of stabilizing authority, a poison we swallow to counter the vertigo of the infinite, a contradiction to short-circuit the potential of growth in us. Let me quote a pertinent passage from Nietzsche's glorious Antichrist. Under Christianity, neither morality nor religion has any point of contact with actuality. It offers purely imaginary causes: God, soul, ego, spirit, free will, or even unfree will, and purely imaginary effects: sin, salvation, grace, punishment, forgiveness of sins. Intercourse between imaginary beings, God, spirits, souls. An imaginary natural history, anthropocentric, a total denial of the concept of natural causes. An imaginary psychology, misunderstandings of self, misinterpretations of agreeable or disagreeable general feelings, for example, of the states of the nervus sympathicus with the help of the sign language of religio-ethical balderdash, repentance, pangs of conscience, temptation by the devil, the presence of God. An imaginary teleology, the kingdom of God, the last judgment, eternal life. This purely fictitious world, greatly to its disadvantage, is to be differentiated from the world of dreams. The latter at least reflects reality, whereas the former falsifies it, cheapens and denies it. Once the concept of nature had been opposed to the concept of God, the word natural necessarily took on the meaning of abominable. The whole of that fictitious world has its sources in hatred of the natural, the real, and is no more evidence of a profound uneasiness in the presence of reality. This explains everything. Who alone has any reason for living his way out of reality? The man who suffers under it. But to suffer from reality, one must be a botched reality. The preponderance of pains over pleasures is the cause of this fictitious morality and religion. But such a preponderance also supplies the formula for decadence. End of quote. I don't expect you to accept all of what I say. Resistance must be activated for growth to take place. If you feel like everything I say makes sense, you most likely are merely shielding yourself from actually confronting it via some sneaky method. For now, contend with my arguments pertaining God and sin. Contend with the famous death of God. Do so honestly and eagerly and await further clarification. I will make you understand just how undeniable this truth is. Truly understand if you give me your time. God is a way to hate the world, a formula to find eternal fault and, little by little, nothing but fault, a world of pure sin. Forever waiting for instruction and punishment from an other that by definition cannot exist. Love the world for what it is, whatever it is. It is here and now, present. If the world remains unworthy of love now, after untold eons of work, untold eons of time, it won't ever be. Develop, with my help, into coherence. I could go on and on, destroying pillars of the obsolete world, and I will, in time, visit most terms of importance and bring them total transformation. Basically, changing your base moral and cognitive position completely transforms most, if not all, concepts of weight. You have a completely new world to look forward to if you pursue cognitive development into coherence. Quite the exciting prospect. A final note before moving on to the exercise descriptions. Despite my sincere efforts, I am sure to be misunderstood to some degree. In general, you will want to jump to some conclusion and argue not against my concrete argument, but something you imagine I must be saying. Don't? Please? For example, you might think that my "think like Mr. Spock and attempt to process everything free of emotional hysteria" line would imply I want you to be all loving and all understanding. While I do suggest we should be that way, that doesn't mean we should try to censor hate away. That we shouldn't, for example, wish to punish criminals or ever take violent action against others. This is not what I mean. I want to extend love and understanding to hate and confusion. I want you to aim to understand and love confusion and hate. Without going too deeply into it, think about how people say that they love to hate a certain villainous character in a piece of fiction. That is one example, but there are endless other things I've said that could be misconstrued. My hope is that by continuously explaining this vision I have from many different angles, it will be successfully relayed to you in its full stereoscopic glory. 10. Exercise description, or learning technical thinking, adopting technical language. On to the exercise descriptions then. This course, as I promised, is not about listening to cool thoughts or philosophizing for the fun of it. LOL, that shit's so deep, bro. No. We have greater ambitions. This course is about taking very real, concrete steps to build a superior mankind within. To that end, I propose here the first of many exercises. Guided by the ideas I shared in the video, you will be able to properly install into your soul part of the Superman. In this case, the understanding and technique of technical thinking, also called positive thinking. You will shift slowly from slave morality into master morality, to the great benefit of yourself and those around you. That said, you might feel lonely at times. Positive thinking is incompatible with the structures of meaning the vast majority of humanity lives under. You will clash, as I do, with everyone around you. It's worth it though, as you will discover a completely new, far more fantastical, joyful world around you. I hope you're ready to tackle that sense of isolation. Technical thinking is not a thing that you think. Rather, it is a way of thinking. I have imparted to you ideas, but you have to train yourself not to think about these ideas, but rather to think in the way these ideas describe and prescribe. To understand something intellectually is very different to truly integrating it. In therapy, for example, a patient can be made to understand his own neurosis in an afternoon, and may very well be convinced that the description of his own misery is accurate. But it typically takes years of effort to go from superficial knowledge to actually transcending the structure of his pain. Let me then describe some exercises that you can do to install positive technical thinking and technical language and supplant your operating system with a new one, to shift from slave to master morality and start your journey of cognitive growth. Start a new relationship with existence. Each exercise is designed to place pressure on your current system of authority to get it to expand. Similar to what you feel with physical exercise, pain and resistance will be present if you're doing these correctly. I will propose 3 exercises for now. First exercise. Write down a list of the subjects that bother you most. Experiences you've had, ideas, and the like. An example of this would be, why X person doesn't love me, or death. Write about it. Explain it to yourself or some hypothetical other. Write until you feel some beauty emerge. The goal here is to fall in love, to confront and process what bothers you. The one rule: be truly, completely honest. There is a great value to catharsis here. Sometimes there are things we want to say, horrible things that, as soon as we say them, we don't believe them anymore. Go for it. Write. Writing is also a way to develop your mind, which is the whole point here. The goal here is not to try and exhaust each theme. Rather, the goal is to relativize and to process to the point some amount of beauty is produced. The goal of the mind is to produce beauty, as beauty is the result of successfully processing information. That is the technical definition of beauty. Misery is merely mental indigestion. Armed with this idea, tackle the things that most frighten you, that cause you the greatest amount of pain, and emerge victorious. If you don't, you will remain forever a slave to them. Every single situation you find yourself in, you will secretly be dealing with the unacknowledged within you. So take that first step and acknowledge the things that most bother you. These are the things you most need to process to move forward cognitively. Force yourself to write as clinical and technical an explanation of each one as you can master. Try to think like a chemist. Try to see in the event, in the idea, nothing but the clash of active forces, as opposed to the absence of forces. Remember, there are no absences, no negative phenomena, only comparisons. Second exercise. Try to describe your own activity and circumstances to yourself whenever you remember to do so. You can tie a ribbon around your finger if that helps. Try to understand your activity, your circumstances again as the result of the clash of positive forces only. For example, you may think that you want to eat a cake, but at the same time, you want to avoid eating the cake. Seek to understand the potential value of the different wills clashing within you. If you have a sweet tooth, think of the untold generations of ancestors latent within your genes and culture that survived because they ate sweet fruits, while you remember at the same time the information that suggests unconstrained ingestion of sugar leads to poor health outcomes. If you feel guilty about something, seek the origins of that admonishing voice within you. The criminal and the judge both have merit, and both exist only by interacting. Reclaim your role as judge. Reclaim your role as criminal. There is no external authority. A variant of this exercise is to silently perceive your activity and circumstances without seeking to articulate them. Witness, witness, witness. In this way, you will allow yourself to process what is active within you, and it will right away appear, if no less painful or more beautiful, at least more interesting. The world is endlessly specific. Is that not cause for wonder enough? One way to go into that is to notice the difference between your circumstances and the idea of nothingness. Let nothingness be a path to affirm the world instead of invalidate it. How's that for a revenge on nihilism? Third exercise. Think about non-pertinent things. A great way to realize just how limited our outlook on life is to remember things judged as non-pertinent. I go with dinosaurs or the rotation of the earth often. Whenever you think about a politician you dislike, for example, think about just how complex the inner workings of his cells are. Think about whether or not he has trilobite ancestors. Think about what he looked like as a newborn baby. Disturb the inertia of the narrative that keeps you trapped in closed circuits by constantly introducing ideas that force you to expand the scope of your thoughts. Out of the 3 exercises, this is by far the most fun, the least painful and strenuous. It points toward wonder. It points toward that fascinating feeling Mr. Spock constantly references. This will be further developed in future videos, but the heart of Superman is one filled with far greater joy than that of normal humans. This shift to a new structure is about perceiving and creating much greater beauty, much greater love, much greater joie de vivre, as these are the emotions of coherence, the emotions of affirmation. The Superman is also capable of suffering things that are unthinkable to most, but that is only possible because of that greatly expanded soul of his. Expand your curiosity, expand your wonder, break the inertia, think about unpertinent things whenever you can. Fourth exercise: childhood curiosity. Superman is for the ambitious. It is a quest for cognitive growth. This cannot be achieved without research. Children famously torment their parents with endless questions, endless why. You shall do the same. Start from any question, pick one at random, and ask why. Then, when you find an answer, repeat why. See how long you can go. Feel free to jump between contexts, from scientific to personal ones. Funny answers are allowed as well. Jokes count as valid. There is a powerful lesson here. This is the merrier counterpart to the first exercise, where we tackled the things we fear most. Here you can do a similar thing, but taking any starting point you like. Why aren't caterpillars satisfied? Why must they become butterflies? Why is the sky blue? Why are jokes funny? The goal is to find a path to constant cognitive growth, to seek in everything proof of whatever it is you want to find. Children are in constant growth and have endless curiosity. The Superman is an evergreen creature. No expansion is possible without curiosity and a playful attitude. Play breaks the world. Play is the ultimate aristocratic activity. So play and ask why. Bonus exercise. Let me gift you another thing. A fun mystery, an introduction to what academia calls the death of the author, or the author as function. This will be a small peek into the glory of Superman as a social phenomenon. Think about the following phrase. He remembered every word, one by one. Mull it over, seeking to understand it as a phenomenon. Whose phrase is it? Who says it to you? How does its meaning work? A tasty mystery. He remembered every word, one by one. He remembered every word, one by one. He remembered every word, one by one. Thus we reached the end of this long video. I will be very surprised to know anyone made it this far. If you are this hypothetical, impossible person, write a comment please, and help me reach more people by sharing this video around. Next video will tackle a subject near and dear to most dreamers. Flight, super strength, superpowers, a practical guide.